Thank you for having me. And thank you everybody for being here. What I want to do today is to tell some stories out of two different ministry contexts. Because I'm a preacher and a storyteller. And so that's where I default when it's time to do something like this. For almost 20 years, I was the incumbent priest at a ministry in Winnipeg called St. Benedict's Table, which some of you will probably have come across. That began over probably, 10 years worth of cups of coffee and pints of beer with friends of mine who were church folk and who wanted also to dream. Musicians, two of them very fine professional musicians, and some other people. And we would dream about what would it be like if we could build the church that we would all feel at home in. None of these folks, incidentally, were Anglican. They were mostly Mennonite, Baptist, and Pentecostal in background, but they wanted a new home. And I attended, my parish at the time actually was a combined Anglican Lutheran community in Winnipeg, the first fully combined one in the country. And I went off to the Lutheran Clergy Conference to kind of see what they were doing and to build some trust with my Lutheran colleagues. The speaker was the founding pastor of Spirit Garage, which was a Minneapolis community that was doing all kinds of things that my friends and I had talked about. And it was like, oh my goodness. I came back from that conference so fired up that we ended up writing a proposal and took it to the bishop. And the bishop said, not right now, please. He wanted me to stay put for another couple of years in this parish. But the notion was planted. And probably 2 years later, we actually sat down with the bishop, a group of 15 of us, and we pitched this idea that we would do a community that was true to the tradition, but in which we kind of had loosened the bolts all around to let it have more free play. And so we started to gather. He gave us his blessing, do it. You can use this church building. You know, they have the evenings free. Jamie, you keep doing your thing at St. Stephen, St. Bede in the mornings. So that's what we did on the evenings. We would gather. Now, the very first Sunday we gathered, there was 7 of us. Not a big congregation. But within 6 months, we were averaging about 40. So there was some resonance here with the way we were doing music and the way we were thinking about liturgy and being both rooted in the tradition, but with that play in it. So we went back to the bishop and we said, look, our numbers now are really, really strong. We have pledges from people for $45,000 over the coming year. We need a little bit more. And he said, well, let me take you to diocesan council and you can tell your story and you can make your request. How much do you need? We said, well, I think if we had $20,000 a year for 2 years, that would probably let us launch. Yes. So we went off and we pitched this to diocesan council and they turned us down absolutely flat. They were fearful for different reasons. I mean, they had money. This is actually what Janet just said. It's really interesting. They had money because we just sold the summer camp property, but they were fearful about letting go of this reserve fund that was a rainy day fund. And it's kind of like, it's pouring rain, let us use it. But no. So we walked out of there pretty discouraged. And I went and sat down with the rector of the parish of All Saints, a fellow named Jim Draper, who had worked in New Westminster as their new church development guy. I sat down with him. I said, Jim, what do we do here? This is what we've got happening. This is what pledges we have. This is how this is all working. But we've just hit a brick wall with the diocesan council. And Jim said, how much do you need? I said, well, we think it's about $20,000 a year for 2 years. That would actually secure us and launch us. He said, what would you say if I found you $20,000 a year for 2 years, but you had to move into All Saints with us? He said, and then in the 3rd year, if you could start paying some rent. It's like, this kind of sounds like a dream. And All Saints is one of the most visible and centrally located churches in the city. So in we went, and we began to just tick along. And after that 2 years, which they'd given us $20,000 in year one and $20,000 in year two, what did we have in the bank? $45,000. In fact, we didn't actually need the 20,000 that they gave us over each of those 2 years, but it kind of gave us a little bit of confidence. I think, though, that it was probably important, that it was really, we felt it was really up to us to make it happen financially, because I've seen too many, especially out of the Fresh Expressions world, too many examples where communities were given a big grant of $100,000 a year for 2 or 3 years, and then in year 4, they couldn't do anything. And in year 5, they were gone. So in some respects, it was a gift to not be given too much. In all of this, though, the heart was in this set of friendships of people who had dreamed and talked and imagined together for those 10 years of drinking coffee and sipping pints of beer and daring to dream a possibility and then taking the opportunity and moving it forward. I think the friendships and the dreaming are so important. Chapter 2. I have now retired as of September 2023. But it was, well, in advance of my retirement, in fact, a full year in advance of my retirement, that our current bishop came to me and said, you know, I hate to put you to work on Sunday mornings, because St. Ben's was Sunday evenings. But he said, I really need you to go and go into St. Michael and All Angels twice a month on Sunday morning for 3 months and help them find their feet again. St. Michael and All Angels is the lone Anglo-Catholic parish in our diocese. Smells and bells, Book of Common Prayer and English Missal. I mean, this is a parish deeply in that tradition. But they'd gone through a really rough patch. COVID had not been good to them. They'd had some real disagreements with the last rector, who was actually asked to leave. And the bishop was kind of like, let's put in an emergency team to help them find the next chapter after the rectors left. So it was me twice a month and another fella, also an Anglo-Catholic, twice a month, and we made it work. But we were small, 10. In a building that would hold 100, 10, including me. So pretty discouraging. But we kept kind of at it. And after 3 months, the bishop said, you know, how's it going? And I said, well, we're still only 12 or 13 people and we're struggling. And I don't know. He said, well, stay another 3 months. Okay. But something shifted. And we started in July doing this. And by November, all of a sudden, instead of 10 or 12, there was 15 or sometimes 20. What was happening? And then I had a conversation with the musician Steve Bell, who will be known to a good number of you, I suspect. And Steve said, what are you doing? What you got anything new up? I said, well, I'm helping with this little parish, and it's really kind of exciting, and it looks like we're going to turn a corner. And he said, where is that building? And I said, well, it's, you know, this neighborhood on that intersection. It's a great little building. He said, could I come and take a look at it? Sure. He said, because Mark Chipman is looking to buy a church building and use it as a sort of a faith-based art center. Now, Mark Chipman is a very, very wealthy man in our city. He's the owner of the Winnipeg Jets, among other things, and a huge reputation as a benevolent character. And I said, well, sure, I'd love to do that. So I got Steve in and Mark in, and Mark's wife came along, and a young architect. And within half an hour, he said, you know, this is the building. This is it. I love it. I want to open the conversation with the parish and with your bishop. because you, as the parish of St. Michael and All Angels, would be welcome to stay here and be part of our life. And it was just like, oh my gosh. So it turned around and connected him to the bishop and connected him to the archdeacon and began discussions in the parish. And lo and behold, he moved towards a purchase. The same time, the diocese had sent in a sort of an evaluation team to do some work on the viability of St. Michael and All Angels, and they had concluded we weren't viable, except for they didn't know anything about this arrangement with Mark Chipman. And the bishop took their advice and said, well, we think we're going to close. And I kind of came back to him, and I'm a friend of the bishop, so I can do this, and one of the senior priests, and I said, I don't think it's a good idea. In fact, I think something really exciting is about to explode in that place. And I think we have to reconsider that. And after some further conversation, he said, yeah, okay, you guys can continue, but we want to see some movement, some growth, some expansion of imagination, some more sense of being a living, breathing church in that neighborhood. And we said, right on. And it has been a great move. Well, the parish continues to grow. There's new energy and engagement. We're actually really excited about being in this building under the direction of Mark Chipman as things begin to happen. As what was the little rectory attached to the church is now become a recording studio, where the old horrible carpets have all been yanked out. We're back to hardwood floors because that's way better for acoustics, right? There's been some concerts in there, but we're guaranteed Sundays, and we're guaranteed holy days, and we're guaranteed Christmas Eve, and all and all and all and all. It's being professionally managed. And although we had good reserve funds, this is actually the best of the best, professionally managed. The high altar and the sanctuary remain completely intact, as do the places where there's statues and icons. Those carpets torn out, thank you very much, but they're going to be replacing the pews with chairs that have room for prayer books and hymnals and the like. The renovations are extremely respectful, and our use is absolutely guaranteed. And our rent, $100 a year for the next 20 years. So suddenly our finances, which are we're okay, but we can push those into ministry, into engagement with the community, into actually doing things, because we don't have to worry about the building we love, because we're in a partnership and it's working. So in that instance, again, it was friendship that launched the possibility. St. Ben's was launched by a set of conversations over coffee and beer, ultimately. And this project came about because of my friendship with Steve Bell and his friendship with Mark Chipman and my friendship with the community. And before you knew it, we had these people in conversation and something extraordinary happened. I actually am convinced that one of the best things for me that's happened in my ministry is to have stayed put in Winnipeg right through the whole of my ordained time, and to have all of those connections and all of those friendships and all of those relationships. It doesn't work for everybody, and there's people who will be in different communities and dioceses. That's fine. But in a Winnipeg context, it's made a huge difference.